There are places in the world that feel beautiful. And then there are places that make you question whether you have somehow wandered into a painting or a film set, or the fever dream of someone who spent too long looking at landscape photography and decided to make it real. Norway is that second kind of place. And the frustrating thing is that no amount of warning prepares you for it. You can watch every travel video, scroll through every Instagram feed, listen to every person who has been there describe it in increasingly desperate superlatives, and you will still turn the first bend in the road and feel something shift in your chest that you were not expecting. Far to the north of Europe, wedged between the North Sea and the Scandinavian mountains, and apparently designed by someone who had unlimited budget and no interest whatsoever in moderation, lies a country where mountains plunge directly into the sea, where waterfalls appear out of cliff faces as if the rock itself has simply decided to become water, where the summer sun refuses to set, and where the locals look at all of it and say, yes, this is a Tuesday. This is Norway. A land of dramatic landscapes, small peaceful villages, some of the most breathtaking scenery on earth, and a population of 5 million people who have had the good sense to build a welfare state on top of it and then go hiking. Today, we are taking a journey through one of the world's most remarkable destinations, and we are going to try, with full awareness of the impossibility of the task, to do it justice. Start with the fjords, because the fjords are where Norway begins. The first thing most visitors notice about Norway is the fjords, and the first thing most visitors feel when they see them is a specific, slightly embarrassing inadequacy of language. You know the word fjord. You have used the word fjord. You have perhaps typed the word fjord into a search engine at some point and looked at the results and thought, yes, that looks nice. Standing beside one is a different experience entirely. These ancient waterways were carved by glaciers over tens of thousands of years, and the glaciers, whatever their other faults, were not doing anything by halves. The result is steep cliffs rising almost vertically from the water to heights that require you to tilt your head back to see where they end. And when you do that, you find they end in snow or cloud or both. And the waterfall you noticed at sea level when you arrived turns out to be falling from somewhere you can no longer identify. The scale is difficult to comprehend, not because it is beyond comprehension, but because your brain keeps refusing to accept it, keeps trying to rescale it into something manageable, and keeps failing. Tiny farms cling to the mountainsides at angles that make agricultural insurance seem like a very complicated product to price. Waterfalls appear from nowhere and fall for what seems like an unreasonable distance before reaching the water below. Snow-capped peaks reflect in fjord water so calm and so dark that the reflection is almost more vivid than the original, and you find yourself looking down more than up, which is not a navigational recommendation for anyone near the edge. The famous Geirangerfjord is often considered one of the most beautiful places in Norway, which is a country where the competition for that title is genuinely ferocious. Visitors can cruise through its waters while passing waterfalls with names like the Seven Sisters, each cascading down the cliffs in a sequence that is, by any reasonable standard, showing off. On the opposite wall of the fjord, the Suitor Waterfall falls alone, and the local legend holds that it represents a rejected suitor drinking himself into oblivion while watching the Seven Sisters across the water. Norway has been telling melancholy stories about its landscape since before written language, and they are very good at it. The Geirangerfjord and the Nærøyfjord, a branch of the Sognefjord that narrows in places to barely 500 meters between its cliff walls, are both UNESCO World Heritage Sites. The Sognefjord itself is the longest and deepest fjord in Norway, stretching over 200 kilometers inland and reaching depths of over 1,300 meters in places, which is more than most people are comfortable thinking about while floating on it in a small boat. Standing beside a Norwegian fjord is one of those experiences that makes you stop talking mid-sentence. Not because there is nothing to say, but because what you are about to say suddenly seems embarrassingly small relative to what is in front of you, and you feel briefly that the polite thing is to say nothing and simply pay attention. Bergen is the city that sits at the gateway to all of this, and it has had the good sense not to try to compete. On Norway's western coast, Bergen is a city of around 300,000 people that somehow manages to feel both historically substantial and entirely relaxed at the same time. It rains in Bergen approximately 230 days a year. A fact that Bergeners will tell you with a pride that only makes sense once you understand that a city that has made peace with its own weather has achieved something that many cities with far better climates have not. The famous Bryggen Harbour, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, is lined with colourful wooden buildings in shades of red and yellow and orange that have stood in various forms since the medieval period, when Bergen was one of the most important trading cities in Northern Europe as part of the Hanseatic League. Walking through the narrow alleyways behind the wharf frontage feels like stepping back in time. The passage so narrow in places that the buildings lean toward each other overhead and the sky becomes a thin strip of grey above. The buildings are a reconstruction of a reconstruction of a reconstruction, fire being a recurring theme in the history of a city built entirely from wood, but the atmosphere they create is one of genuine historical texture rather than heritage artifice. Bergen has a fish market on its waterfront that has been operating in some form for centuries, and that is, in the practical sense, an expensive tourist trap, and in the experiential sense, completely worth it. The seafood is extraordinary. The salmon, the king crab, the shrimp sold in paper cones to be eaten on the harbour side. Bergen's proximity to some of the most productive cold water fisheries in the world makes itself felt in the quality of what appears on the stalls each morning. Behind the city, 7 mountains ring the urban area in a way that gives Bergen the quality of a city that has been carefully placed in a bowl of hills, the mountains visible from almost every street in the centre, snow on their upper slopes for a significant portion of the year. A funicular called the Fløibanen runs from the city centre to the summit of Mount Fløyen in 8 minutes, and the view from the top on a clear day, which Bergen promises no more than 130 days per year, is one of the finest urban panoramas in Scandinavia. For many travellers, Bergen offers the perfect introduction to Norway, a place where history and nature coexist without either requiring the other to make way. A place where you can eat extraordinary fish in the rain in front of a medieval warehouse and feel, without any difficulty at all, that you are in one of Europe's most characterful cities. One of the best ways to experience Norway is to simply look out of a train window, and the country has built an entire argument for this proposition in the form of its rail network. The Bergen Railway, running between Bergen and Oslo across the Hardangervidda mountain plateau, is consistently ranked among the most scenic rail journeys in the world. The Flåm Railway, a branch line that descends from the plateau to the Fjord below in 20 kilometers of engineering that required 17 years to build and involves 20 tunnels and a gradient so steep that special brakes had to be designed specifically for it, is one of the most dramatic short rail journeys on Earth. As the train moves through the Norwegian countryside, the landscape changes in ways that make paying attention effortless. Green valleys give way to rugged mountains. Rivers that appear to be in a considerable hurry rush beneath the bridges. Tiny villages appear and disappear among the forests and the snow. The Hardangervidda Plateau in winter is a landscape of such stripped-back simplicity, white ground and grey sky, and the occasional lonely cairn marking the route, that it has the quality of a Japanese ink painting, all negative space and suggestion. The journey becomes part of the destination. Every turn reveals a view that, had you paid a landscape artist to produce it, you would have sent back with a note saying, "This is too much, it looks contrived." Norway does not care about looking contrived. Norway just looks like Norway, and Norway is extraordinarily good at it. Norway is a paradise for people who enjoy walking up large hills in uncertain weather, and the country has produced some of the world's most celebrated destinations for exactly this activity. Few hiking destinations are more famous than Trolltunga, translated as the Troll's Tongue, a horizontal rock formation that extends from a mountainside over a sparkling lake 700 meters below. The hike to reach it is approximately 27 kilometers in total, gains around 800 meters of elevation, and takes most people between 8 and 12 hours. The reward, if you are inclined toward rewards that consist of standing on a rock shelf above a very long drop for the purpose of taking a photograph, is one of the most spectacular viewpoints anywhere in the world. The photograph that most people want from Trolltunga is the one where a person stands alone on the rock with the lake below and the mountains behind, looking simultaneously casual and brave. Getting that photograph requires waiting in a queue of people who also want that photograph, which is the experience Norway's tourist board does not put on the brochure, but which is, in its own way, a perfect illustration of what happens when a place is both extraordinarily beautiful and easily found on social media. Preikestolen, or Pulpit Rock, is perhaps more famous still. A flat-topped cliff rising 600 meters above the Nærøyfjord, its perfectly rectangular plateau so geometrically improbable that it looks engineered rather than geological. The hike to reach it is significantly shorter and easier than Trolltunga, which means the queue of people waiting to photograph themselves on it is proportionally longer. On a clear summer day, several thousand people make the hike. The viewpoint is large enough to absorb them, but only just. And the experience of standing on the edge looking down at the Nærøyfjord below is one that the crowd cannot entirely diminish, because the drop is simply too absolute and the fjord too far below and the horizon too wide for the presence of other human beings to register as the dominant impression. Across Norway, countless trails lead into landscape that the country has had the political will and the public consensus to protect at a scale that remains remarkable. Some routes pass through forests of birch and pine where the ground is soft with moss, and the silence is the kind that cities have entirely forgotten. Others cross glaciers on which you feel, with some accuracy, that you are walking on something that does not particularly need you to be there. Many end at viewpoints so beautiful they seem almost fictional, and the response most people have of reaching for a phone camera is both entirely understandable and entirely inadequate. Far above the Arctic Circle lie the Lofoten Islands, and many travelers who have seen a great deal of the world will tell you, quietly and with some certainty, that they are the most beautiful place they have ever been. This is a significant claim. It is also, repeatedly and independently, the same claim. The Lofoten Islands appear so consistently at the top of experienced travelers' personal lists that it is difficult to dismiss as enthusiasm or novelty. Something about the combination of elements here is doing something that other beautiful places, for all their beauty, do not quite manage. The islands rise from the Norwegian Sea in a wall of sharp, jagged peaks, the mountains descending directly to the water with no coastal plain between them, the rock and the sea meeting in a series of bays and sounds and skerries of extraordinary intricacy. The traditional fishing villages, built in the red and yellow wooden råbur cabins that were originally quarters for the seasonal fishing workers who came to catch the Arctic cod each winter, sit at the water's edge below these mountains in compositions so perfectly arranged between the peaks and the sea that they look like they were placed by someone with a very good eye for a photograph. The fishing industry that built the Lofoten Islands is still here, still real. Not reconstructed for tourists, but operating as it has operated for centuries. The dried stockfish that made these islands economically significant, hanging in their thousands on wooden racks across the hillsides during the winter season, the smell of drying cod permeating the air in a way that is either atmospheric or overwhelming, depending on your relationship with very strong fish. The islands supply a significant proportion of the stockfish that is exported to southern Europe, particularly to Italy and Portugal, where bacala and bacalhau are national culinary institutions, a supply chain connecting Arctic Norway to Mediterranean kitchens that has been operating for over 500 years. In summer, the midnight sun paints the Lofoten landscape in golden light throughout the night. The low angle of the sun producing a quality of illumination that photographers describe with the specific, slightly manic enthusiasm of people who have found the thing they have been looking for their entire professional lives. The sea turns gold. The mountains turn copper. The råbur cabins glow. And it does not stop, does not fade to darkness, continues through what your body insists should be night, but which your eyes cannot reconcile with the concept. Sleeping in the Lofoten Islands in summer requires blackout curtains and a willingness to negotiate with your own circadian rhythm. In winter, the islands experience the polar night, the period when the sun does not rise above the horizon, And the light that fills those hours is a deep blue twilight that settles over the snow and the dark water and the mountains and creates an atmosphere that photographers call the blue hour, and that locals have simply learned to live with, which is its own form of adaptation. And on the clear nights of the polar winter, the sky above the Lofoten Islands can do something that people travel thousands of miles specifically to witness: the Northern Lights. There is a version of this description that reaches for poetry, that talks about celestial rivers and silent dances and the vault of heaven and so on. That version is not wrong exactly, but it is performing an experience rather than reporting one, and the Northern Lights deserve a more honest account. The Northern Lights are, in scientific terms, the result of charged particles from the sun interacting with gases in the Earth's atmosphere along the lines of the magnetic field, producing light at specific wavelengths in a band around the magnetic poles called the auroral oval. Norway's northern regions sit directly beneath this oval for much of the year. In practical terms, what this means is that on a clear night, at the right time of year, the sky above you can do something that your brain is not equipped to process calmly. It begins usually as a greenish glow on the horizon, faint enough that you wonder if you are imagining it or if it is just light pollution from a distant settlement. Then it moves. And movement is the thing no photograph conveys and no description quite captures. The aurora is not static, not a fixed light, but a dynamic, shifting, folding, curtaining phenomenon that can go from a faint glow to a full sky display of greens and purples and blues in the space of seconds, and then fade, and then return, and then do something you were not expecting at all. People who have seen it describe two phases. The first is awe. The second, which arrives within a few minutes and overlaps significantly with the first, is an urgent desire to photograph it, at which point the next hour is spent trying to get the camera settings right while the aurora does what it wants above you and declines to wait. The photographs, when they come out, are almost always either underexposed or overexposed or blurry, and they never capture the movement. And they are still the most extraordinary photographs most people have ever taken. For many visitors, witnessing the aurora becomes a memory of a particular category, the kind that sits in a separate file from ordinary memories, the kind you return to not with nostalgia, but with something closer to disbelief that it actually happened to you. Norway's northern regions offer some of the most reliable aurora viewing in the world, and the industry built around it, the tours, the heated viewing pods, the wilderness camps positioned under the auroral oval is both extensive and, when the sky cooperates, entirely worth every krone. Oslo is the capital, and it would like you to know that it is not just a gateway to the rest of Norway. Thank you very much. With a population of around 700,000 in the city proper, Oslo is a capital city that has managed a particular trick. Being genuinely cosmopolitan and sophisticated in its cultural and culinary life, while retaining a relationship with the natural world that most comparable European capitals have entirely lost. Within 30 minutes of the city center, you can be skiing. Within 20 minutes, you can be in forest. The Oslofjord, the city's waterfront, is swimmable, and Norwegians swim in it. Because Norwegians are not people who let a northern European climate stop them from doing things they want to do. The city's museums are, by any standard, remarkable. The Viking Ship Museum houses 3 of the best-preserved Viking ships in the world, pulled from the burial mounds of Vestfold in the 19th century and restored to a condition that makes the craftsmanship of 9th century Norwegian shipbuilders immediately, strikingly apparent. The Fram Museum contains the actual vessel in which Fridtjof Nansen crossed the Arctic ice and Roald Amundsen reached the Antarctic, the most famous polar exploration ship in history, sitting inside a purpose-built structure on the Big Doy Peninsula. The National Museum, which reopened in 2022 as the largest museum in the Nordic countries, houses Edvard Munch's The Scream in a room specifically designed around it, which is the kind of thing a country does when it has the world's most famous expressionist painting and wants to make the point without saying anything. The food scene in Oslo has changed dramatically in the past 2 decades. From a city where the culinary reputation was built almost entirely on the smorgasbord and the brown cheese and the price of a beer, to one where the new Nordic philosophy that put Copenhagen on the global culinary map has produced a generation of chefs working with Norwegian ingredients, Norwegian seasons, and Norwegian preserving traditions to produce food that is simultaneously deeply rooted in its landscape and technically ambitious to a degree that has attracted international recognition. The price of that beer, it should be noted, has not changed in the direction one might hope. Oslo is one of the most expensive cities in the world, a fact that reflects both Norway's extraordinary standard of living and its petroleum-funded public sector, and that arrives as a shock to visitors who have been mentally preparing themselves and still find they were not sufficiently prepared. A round of drinks in Oslo is a financial event. Budget accordingly. Oslo's relationship with outdoor life is not a weekend hobby or a tourist proposition. It is structural, embedded in the city's identity and its residents' sense of who they are. The Holmenkollen Ski Jump, perched on a hill above the city where it has existed in various forms since 1892, is both a functioning venue for world-class ski jumping and a symbol of Norway's relationship with winter sports that goes beyond athletics into something closer to cultural identity. Norway has won more Winter Olympic medals than any other nation in history, a fact that is not unrelated to a country where cross-country skiing is considered a reasonable way to commute, and where children are put on skis at ages when children in other countries are still working out walking. The Nordmarka Forest, the vast woodland that begins where the northern suburbs of Oslo end and extends for hundreds of kilometers into the interior, is used by Oslo's residents year-round in a way that reflects the concept of allemannsretten, the right of all people to access nature regardless of who owns the land, a legal principle embedded in Norwegian law that has no equivalent in most countries, and that reflects a fundamental national value about the relationship between people and the natural world. You cannot be trespassing in Norwegian nature. Nature belongs to everyone. This is not a marketing slogan, it is the law. The concept sits at the heart of something that visitors notice about Norway, but sometimes struggle to articulate. That the country's relationship with its landscape is not the relationship of ownership or tourism or economic exploitation, but something older and more reciprocal, the relationship of people who understand that the landscape was here before them and will be here after them, and that the appropriate response to this fact is not to dominate it, but to participate in it carefully and with respect. Sometimes the greatest experience in Norway is not a destination, but a road. The scenic routes of Norway are 18 designated driving routes across the country, select for the quality and variety of the landscape they pass through and equipped with architect-designed rest stops, viewing platforms, and service facilities that represent a public investment in the experience of driving through nature that no other country has quite matched. The routes include everything from the Atlantic Ocean Road, a series of bridges connecting islands along the storm-battered coast of Møre og Romsdal that was voted Norway's construction of the century, to the Geirangerfjord route through Norway's fruit-growing region where the fjord is lined with apple and cherry orchards. The roads twist along coastlines where the sea is visible in every direction, cross mountain passes that close in winter, and that you understand immediately why they close in winter, and pass through landscape that changes character every few kilometers in ways that make paying attention to the road a somewhat competing priority with paying attention to everything else. Driving through Norway often feels less like transportation, and more like the landscape has decided to take you somewhere, and you are simply following. Every bend produces a view that the previous view gave no indication of preparing you for. A hidden waterfall, a quiet village at the head of a fjord, a lake so still and so perfectly surrounded by mountains that it looks less like a lake and more like a mirror someone has dropped in a forest. It is the kind of driving that makes you miss your turning because you were looking at something else, and then not mind at all because the detour is beautiful too. Norway is not a country that rushes to impress you. It does not have the operatic grandeur of Italy or the romantic self-consciousness of France or the studied quirkiness of destinations that have been carefully curated for visitor appeal. It is not trying to be anything other than what it is, which is possibly why it is so extraordinarily good at being what it is. Its beauty unfolds at the pace of someone who has no particular reason to hurry. In the silence of a fjord on a morning when the mist is still on the water and the mountains above are barely visible. In the glow of the midnight sun at 11 o'clock at night, when your body insists it should be dark, and your eyes cannot agree. In the reflection of peaks on still water that makes the world appear to exist in two registers simultaneously, the real and the perfect copy, and you cannot confidently say which is which. It is a place that reminds you, with no particular effort and no dramatic announcement, how extraordinary the natural world can be when it has been given enough time and enough geological violence and enough weather to express itself fully. A place where every season offers something that the previous season made you forget was possible. A place where some of the most affecting moments are the quietest, standing at the edge of something enormous and saying nothing because there is nothing to say that the landscape has not already said better. Norway will not be the cheapest trip you ever take. The beer alone will ensure that. It will not be the warmest, it will not be the most convenient. The weather will at some point do something that was not in the forecast, which in Norway means something significant, and the light will at some point last so long that your relationship with sleep will become theoretical. It will in all likelihood be the most extraordinary place you have ever seen. And you will go back. They always go back. For travelers seeking beauty, scale, wildness, and the specific kind of perspective that only comes from standing somewhere that makes human concerns feel briefly and mercifully small, Norway remains one of the most remarkable destinations on Earth. A land shaped by ice, sea, and time, and the patience of geological forces that were not working to any human schedule. It was here long before anyone was watching. It will be here long after we have stopped. In the meantime, it is available for anyone willing to go north, pack waterproofs, budget appropriately for the beer, and pay attention. That, it turns out, is all it asks. And everything it gives in return is worth it.